Okay, just letting you in on my trials and tribulations. Went into town twice, also hunting parts for the Maxima, which, as you saw the other video, that took 2 days instead of like half a day like it should have. Went into town. I noticed when I was cleaning the fasteners up on this, and I kind of remember this, I guess from when I did this engine a long time ago, there's like marks on a couple of the threads that I'm pretty sure they go into water. Kind of weird, like right there, it's got like a serration all the way down, a potential leak path. So I went into town this morning and I got some of these really cool gold irradiated hardware, and they're basically the same length. They have a larger shoulder, but they use the same size hex, so that's fine. I'll use those. It looks kind of cool. I also noticed, I don't know why, also kind of weird, my pulley to balancer bolts, two of them are a different length. So I've got two short ones just by a little bit. And again, on the balancer, they're kind of far enough inward. I can't imagine that would cause a balance problem, but just because I'm kind of OCCD about stuff like that. These are like maybe a 1/4 inch to an 1/8 inch shorter, kind of weird. So I picked up new fasteners at O'Reilly's, and I think these are grade, they didn't say on the shelf, but I think these were advertised as grade 5, which would be the equivalent of the quality these were. Oh, these are grade 8. Okay, sure. But as usual, I keep having these weird problems. I have to check everything now when I go to auto parts stores. I don't know why. I don't know if it's supply chain stuff or stuff sits on the shelf too long, but it says there's 8 in here and there's only 7. I have one left over. And I almost flipped out when I went to do the washers. Some of them are hidden under the packaging. There's 2 washers left. It says you get 8 washers, which is kind of cool, right? 8 fasteners, 8 washers. I only need 6, which is fine. And these are just a tad shorter than the longish ones. But I'm guessing, we'll set those side by side, not a huge deal. And then there's the short one. And I think it's basically the same length as the short one. Not sure why that was like that. I plucked this engine out of a '79 Newport many years ago. It was pretty tired. I don't really know how much work was done to it. I don't know what happened there, but I vaguely remember that from way back when. Anyway, this thing's been apart so long. I set all the brackets in place. I got all the screws in because you want to figure this out before you put the gasket sealer on, right? So it looks like all the bolts are poking through the right distance. These go through a little longer, but that's not a huge deal. That's fine. But yeah, with cast iron, you only need like 3 threads, and there's way more than 3 coming through in all of these. This one will poke down farther too. Okay, so I got all that figured out. So now the only thing I have to do is I'm going to take my gasket set, which is, I guess it's still over here. I'll bring it over. It's a Felpro TCS 6563-1. Looks like they give you 2 different oil pan seals. I know mine is the big fat one, which I guess is the 361. So it's got 2 little, locating bullets on it, right? And it looks like they deliberately make one bullet larger than the other so that you can't install it backwards. And that's just going to go down in here. Looks like it's going to go in this way. We're going to tuck it down in like that and then just push it in the hole. It's got a hole on each end, a locating hole, and that'll go in like that. That's fine. So we got this all cleaned up. That looks really good. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to get our new end seals for where the part that sticks out from the oil pan. Those have to go down in there. It also came with this goofy felt washer. I actually had to look it up. I guess some balancers put that piece of felt on the back if it had an area to receive it. Otherwise, it's, I guess, thought to sling off. I guess it's kind of a dust seal. I guess the idea is to keep the crud out. This one doesn't use it because the balancer, I don't think the balancer is designed to receive it. See how it kind of just sits on top like that. I think some balancers, this is filled in here, and that would hold it in place. Otherwise, I think this would probably fling around and tear and get thrown off. So since this one never had one, I'm not going to fool with it. So we'll just get this thing, next thing we'll do, we'll get the gaskets all sauced up with a little bit of, I think, Permatex Black Ultra. I'm going to use a little bit of, I find that this Teflon Permatex thread sealant with PTFE, it works okay-ish. I think it probably likes for stuff to be like really clean. So what I did, and it's getting harder to find it, and I actually had to look this morning. They call it VersaChem now, and it's that non-hardening sealant. I think they used to call that Permatex #2. And that works really good for thread sealant, especially if you reposition the fasteners occasionally. Eventually this stuff does get kind of hard. But if you look at the bottom here, it says they are designs of TMS of Illinois Tool Works, or ITW. So VersaChem, I believe, used to be called the Permatex. I don't know why they do that. Maybe Permatex doesn't want to put their name on that. They want to be associated with high-tech sealants. But here's their anti-seize lubricant. And on the back, it says the same thing, Illinois Tool Works. Trademarks Illinois Tool Works. So I'm pretty sure that this, what they're calling what does it say? VersaChem? VersaChem gasket sealant. That's the old Permatex, the old style, old school sealant. And I've always used this for thread sealant. It works really good. All right, I guess the next frame, we'll be setting this in the car, and we'll get this thing buttoned up today. We may actually get 2 done today. We will have got the Maxima done. It took 2 days, but we got it together today. Took it out to lunch, and then we'll see if we can get this one together, and maybe we'll actually take it for a drive on Sunday. Hey, just sharing this with you all. Getting that seal in the oil pan and getting that little nipple to go through was really difficult. I actually had to enlarge that hole 1 drill size to get that thing to pull through. It just did not want to go. I swear that nipple was larger than the last one that was in this pan. And I know this is a China-made chrome-plated pan from the 90s, but the other one seemed to fit on okay-ish. Of course, I did it, outside the car, but we got it on, and now we're gonna have to smooge a little sealer right there, I guess, where the cork's gonna meet, and then we're about ready to drop this thing in. So trial fit, I got this thing sitting here, and it looks like to me that gasket should be cut right there and fit underneath that seal lip right there, but it's real close to that bolt hole. That just looks like not that great, but I can tell this is shimmed up too high. I don't think that's meant to have that cork gasket sitting on top of this rubber seal like that. That little flap right there, that's designed to have the cork seal underneath it. It looks like to me, or right next to it, and you have just a little sealer there. Same deal over here as well. And you can see what I did is I stuck a bolt in the top, through the top, to keep the gasket from sliding off. When I slide this in place, that worked really good. But it almost looks like maybe I should have glued it to the timing cover. Not the timing cover, to the oil pan, which I could peel that off. It's not a big deal, and I could trim that and set it in there instead. And that might be what I end up doing. But I tell you what, this thing goes in hard, and you can see how this is off center from the balancer, where the balancer would go, right? I'm pulling down on it a little bit. And I know that'll line up when you tighten down on it, but that's, yeah, it's funny, they don't really show you how to do this. No instructions come with this Velcro set. Maybe I could look up that actual part number and see, but that's the only thing I'm not sure on. When we did the Mustang, we didn't have that problem. It was very self-explanatory. I think everything had to be attached to the timing cover, whereas on this one the rubber seal stays in the oil pan, and then it looked like the thing to do was to glue the gasket. I just use a little high-tack on the timing cover to glue the cork on there just to keep it in place, but yeah, I'm kind of having second thoughts on that. We're gonna have to rethink on that one. Hey, one more helpful tip. Just because I don't do this stuff every day, and I kind of remember from when I put this together many years ago, this big fat seal that goes on the 360, and I guess it's 340, 360 specific, maybe only 360, not sure. I know the 273, 318 stuff has I think a smaller, thinner gasket, or a rubber seal, pan seal in the front. And these two gold irradiated bolts that are going into the block. One there and there. Those are actually used as locating dowels as well. So the holes that those bolts go through are a little smaller in diameter than the rest of the bolts on the engine, and they're there to get that thing properly centered so that the timing chain, or not the timing chain, so that the harmonic balancer seal is centered around the crankshaft so that you get a perfect seal when you put the dampener back on. So, and just for the heck of it, I did take and run a tap through the aluminum timing chain cover threads to clean them up so that I could have a bolt that would go all the way through. And I used slightly longer bolts with washers just for getting this lined up. I may even just leave them in once I do it. I did do it without the gaskets in place other than the rubber piece. And you can see I had to cinch down on it pretty good to get those two bolts to line up because it's a really tight fit there. So yeah, basically you kind of have to do it by feel. You kind of cinch down on the oil pan bolt, the lower one, until you can get this upper bolt for the timing chain cover to go in that hole on either side of the block. And you got to be careful when you're doing it. If they go in hard, you're going to have to either back off on that bolt or tighten it up a little more on the oil pan because you can goober up the threads. So they need to go in pretty close to finger tight if possible, or a little more than finger tight. Just threading them in. And then once you have these two in, all the rest of the bolt holes are going to line up. They'll line up perfectly. Hey, just showing a little, what I think is probably a useful tidbit of information. As I showed, having that quart gasket fast tacked or high tacked on the bottom of that timing chain cover was not the way to go. So obviously looking, this is probably the right way to do it. I went ahead and trimmed it so that it just barely fits under that thin rubber flap on this right here. It's a very thin little overhang. You see there's a little gap right there, which I'm going to go back and fill that with RTV before I, when this compresses down. It probably would seal, but I'm not going to take a chance of it not sealing. I'm going to put a little sealer down in there, and I'll probably put just a little tiny bit right on the top, and then I'm going to fill this inside this 90 degree where these gasket meets the block. I'm going to put a probably a good 1/8 inch or more bead of silicone right there where it's going to meet the gasket, which I'm going to glue to the block. And I think that's the way that's going to go in. Definitely the other setup I had, like what we did on the Mustang. The Mustang's different. It doesn't have the locators on the oil pan like the Chrysler does. So we basically on the Ford, we ended up fast tacking the rubber seal and the quart to the timing chain cover and then slid it in. But this is going to be the opposite. We're going to have this located in the timing chain on the oil pan, and there's not going to be anything on the timing chain cover, and that should just go right in. Okay, we're going to set this thing in. I put a little bit of that, I call it Permatex number 2. It's actually called VersaChem Type 2 now. That's that really nice non-hardening sealer that sticks to everything, including fingers, gloves, people. I think I've only got one that hits water on the short ones. So I got one of those coated, and then this one that goes in here, because we got to put the timing chain cover on first, because I don't have access to this bolt once the water pumps on, I guess, unless I go in from underneath with a wrench, but I'm not going to do that. So, but I guess what I will do, just to help me line things up, I guess I will borrow, I'll probably borrow a couple of fasteners too, just to make sure when I set this thing in. So we'll go ahead. I'm just looking down here real quick. I've coated the gasket on both sides and already stuck it onto the block. I figure that's the smartest way to do it. And then I put a bead of silicone in each of the corners where the timing chain cover is going to meet the block. And then I was able to pull this black rubber back and just pump it full of silicone on both ends. And we're going to set that on. Okay, it's looking more gooder. Yeah, she's coming together. I have to wait to drop the alternator in until I get my fuel pump on. Then I'm going to go ahead and drop the balancer in, put the pulley on that, and get the power steering belt tightened up. Just showing you all in here. Looks like all that gasket's cinched together really good. See, we're kind of squeezed out. Don't think I'm going to have any leak problems. Yeah, it looks fine. I'm happy with that. That should be fine. Get that balancer slid on there. And I think this thing's just maybe an hour and a half away from running. Cool. Before I slide the balancer on, I like to put just a little bit of sealant on the inside of the hub, especially in the keyway. Sometimes you get a leak pass there if you don't use a little bit of sealer. And then I also oil the snout a little bit, and I've also greased the seal. So I shouldn't have any problems there either. I'm going to get this slid on. Slow going, but at least I got plenty of room to work in here. I almost got it on. Yep, still got a little ways to go. All right, looks like that's about right. It bottomed out. Cool. Yeah, that looks good. Got a nice uniform smear of silicone coming out through the keyway and then all around it. So that pretty much guarantees I won't sling any oil out the front that way anyway. All right, fuel pump connected. That's all done. All right, I guess next thing's alternator. Okay, I have the clutch installed. I installed a new connector. I put a little shrink wrap on this side of it just to keep it from flexing too much. And then I've got this braided stuff that kind of fit in there. That looks good. We're using the original wire retainer. I think I got that routed right. It's not getting pinched by anything. Yep, that looks good. And I got my woodruff key in there. That's fine. Fits a little loose, not sure why. Didn't seem to be a problem before, so I'm going to reuse it. It has an NK-OK bearing, or NSK, and it says it's made in Japan. And that's probably the standard part number, whether it's a Timken or whoever. That's usually the way bearing numbers are. It would have been nice to see Timken, because that's what all Chryslers used to come with back in the day. Okay, that looks good. I think it's been pretty true. That looks good. All right, getting close. Hey, just going to show you one more thing before I set the alternator in. This is one of those infamous AMC fuel filters. It has an extra outlet on it, and that's for recirc. And I use the factory vent tube for that. And then I've vented the gas cap for now until I can install a proper vent in the tank. And this was in an effort to kind of put a squelch on the vapor lock. I've had a lot of vapor lock issues now that they put I guess the extra ethanol in the fuel, which the ethanol itself doesn't seem to cause it. It's the fact that when the gasoline companies can use the ethanol, it's the other ingredients that they don't put in, which actually lowers the boiling point of fuel, which is not a problem for fuel-injected cars, but it's a huge problem for a carbureted car. All right, that's starting to look together again. I still have to fix the steering linkage, the bad idler arm. I'll probably do that while the car's still up on jack stand, so I'm probably not going to drive it today. But everything's looking pretty good. Yeah, cool. Man, that was a tough job.